Well, again, I want to welcome everyone to this presentation on mold toxicity. And I want to thank my two friends that are in the background. Hyun is not quite so in the background, but Dr. Hyun Bang and Davina Peters, who are helping things to run smoothly for me as a Zoom rookie today. So welcome again. And mold toxicity is something that is very real to me. It's very real to Dr. St. Rose, and it's very real to Jana. Jana's not able to join us live today, but we have a pre-recorded testimony from her that I'm going to be sharing in just a little bit. Mold is something that has been around for a long time. In fact, we're going to talk about in just a few minutes that even the Bible addresses mold and how to deal with it in a house, on clothing, and it actually calls mold in a house leprosy of a house. Recently, Dr. Dale Bredesen, I read something, I guess it's been a few years ago now, actually, where he referred to mold toxicity as inhalational Alzheimer's. And I have found that to be very true, because in the thick of my mold toxicity, which I'm a little bit better now, I had very difficult time remembering anything, finding words to express my thoughts. It was very frustrating. Before we go further, though, I would like to share this disclaimer that anything that we share in this presentation today is not to be taken as medical advice. This is for educational purposes. We encourage you to do your own research and work with a qualified health practitioner like I did, and that would be Dr. St. Rose. So let me just share a couple of statistics with you. Recent studies have shown that up to 85% of houses and actually buildings in the United States have the presence of mold. You know, we call them WBDs, water damaged, WDBs, water damaged buildings. But we have to remember that that mold is not always visible, nor is it always something that you can smell. There's kind of a myth that mold doesn't hurt everyone, but that's really not true. It just doesn't affect everyone the same way. Some of us are actually a little bit more sensitive, and mold toxicity has actually been linked to autism. Current research suggests that most chronic illnesses could have a mold toxicity component to it. And I personally believe even a parasite, I believe that mold and parasites are also connected. I was listening to a research paper, or research lecture by Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt one day, and he talked about how they had done this test where they had two Petri dishes with mold on the Petri dishes, and they set one down just open next to a Wi-Fi router, and then they set the other next to a Wi-Fi router inside a Faraday cage. If you don't know what a Faraday cage is, that is basically a shield against the intrusion of the waves from Wi-Fi and electromagnetic frequencies. When they did that and they went back after a certain time, I think it was 24 hours or so, they found that the Petri dish that was uncovered, didn't have the protection of the Faraday cage, had produced 600 times more mycotoxins than the one that was in the Faraday cage. All molds produce spores, but not all molds produce mycotoxins. And I'm going to let Dr. St. Rose address that a little bit later. You know, it's through our minds that we connect with God and understand spiritual truth. And I really believe that, particularly as it is in today's environment, I believe that mold is one of the devil's premium weapons to hijack our ability to understand truth. So we really need to take mold very seriously. And indeed, the Bible takes mold very seriously. There's an entire chapter in the Bible that's devoted to how to deal with mold in a building. And I'll just run through it, these bullet points quickly. If an individual suspected that their home might have mold, they went and told the priest. The house was evacuated and emptied. The priest went in and looked, and if he saw what was suspicious, the home was closed up for a week and left empty. If that mold spread, and they called it leprosy, if it spread, then the stones that were affected were removed, and all, not just a certain area, but all of the plaster inside the house was scraped off and removed to an unclean place outside the city. The stones and the plaster were then replaced, and the home, was observed again. And if that came back, the house was completely torn down and taken outside of the city. So how many of us today would be that thorough on our first discovery of mold to take out everything, scrape out all of these interior surfaces that could have been affected? And then if, it comes back, to actually destroy the house. This is how serious mold is. This is how serious God takes it. And so I think that we need to be a little more serious. And back in the 1800s, there was a very prolific writer. Her name was Ellen White. And one of her favorite topics was health. And we can see in this passage that she talks about death in the spare bed, and how the moldy, damp rooms that they were in seriously affected their health. And they would actually take the linens off of beds in guest rooms that they were placed in when they would travel and speak. And they would dry these sheets before the fire, before they would sleep in the beds. People probably thought she was a Fruit Loop. And, we have to be willing to be considered a Fruit Loop, as it were, to protect our health. So here she also says that it caused soreness in the flesh. That sounds to me kind of like fibromyalgia. Okay, here's another one where she talked about how the mold affected her eyes. And that's one thing that mold definitely does, is it affects your vision. There's actually a test called the VCS test. And if you can't pass that, it's the visual acuity test. And if you can't pass that test, then it's a good chance that you're affected by the mold. And then here, this one is the saddest passage of all, because this lady, 2 of her sons died from mold toxicity. And so this is very, very serious. So I hope that you will take it more seriously after this presentation today. All 3 of us on the panel have been affected by mold toxicity. And I'm just sharing a brief testimony. Then we're going to, Jana pre-recorded hers, and I'll share that in just a few minutes. And then we're going to turn the time over to Dr. St. Rose. I mentioned this, that mold inhalation is called, mold toxicity is called inhalational Alzheimer's. But Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt mentioned something that was very interesting to me. In the chemtrails and cloud seeding that's being done in these things we see in the sky, tests have been done on those, and there actually have been found mold spores being sprayed from these things. Mold toxins have been implicated in Gulf War syndrome, and mycotoxins have been used in biological warfare. So they are very, very toxic. This is a photograph of the actual home that my husband and I were renting when I first got really sick with mold. And you can see here on the slide what some of my symptoms were. This is not a complete list, but there were times that I didn't think I was going to survive. I had constant nausea and vomiting, severe dizziness, palpitations, my heart was pounding, headache, severe fatigue, body jerks, electric shock sensations. I had a metallic taste in my mouth, and I would just drink water, and go to the bathroom. It just went right through me. I thought I had diabetes, and I couldn't find words. I couldn't remember anything. And all of these things that happened to me as a result of living in this home. And these, the one on the left is not an actual picture of that house. That's a picture that I took of a home here in North Dakota, near where my husband and I are staying just recently. And the reason I shared this picture is because when I pointed it out to the lady who was showing us the house, she said, that could just be cleaned up. That's not a problem. And I didn't say anything, but that is major. I guarantee you on the back side of that sheetrock, it's a lot worse than that. And that right there is enough to make somebody like me or Jana or even Dr. St. Rose very ill. And the carpet here in the other photograph is a picture of the house where I got so sick, and it was loaded with aspergillus and stachybotrys. Sheetrock and carpets and cardboard, all of those porous materials are food to mold. So everything that we had stored in the basement, we even had it up on pallets off the concrete floor, but everything that was in cardboard boxes was moldy, and we lost all of it. And here's a picture of my husband hauling our things out to burn. We lost all of our furniture. We lost some of our clothing, and we've even since this time lost more of our clothing that we found mold, like on shoes and things like that. It was very difficult to lose all of our belongings in this way. And it's been very difficult um, to travel from place to place and try to find something that is not mold infested. We have yet to find a rental home that doesn't have mold. So it's been very difficult to heal, because you're just constantly exposed. We have spent some time in a tent, and that's when I do the best, out in the fresh air. I have a constant sense of being unsettled and unwell, and it's a constant fight for my health. We have felt somewhat ostracized, and it is embarrassing to have to tell friends and family that your house is making me sick. I can't come because your house is making me sick. It's embarrassing. It's been financially devastating. Mold toxicity is a very expensive illness. As I said, we lost all of our furniture. We lost many of our belongings. And it makes for strained relationships. But it has brought us closer to the Lord. And for that, I'm very grateful. And now I'm going to share the pre-recorded testimony of Jana with you. And after that, we'll turn the time over to Dr. St. Rose.
Hi, I'm Jana, and this is my husband, Pat. Dana asked me to talk a little bit about my story with mold. I'm currently living in a moldy environment, so I'm having a hard time with getting my words and thoughts together. And so I asked my husband to help me remember everything. In approximately 2007, we rented a house that when it would rain, it had leaks through the roof so bad that we had to put pots and pans down to catch the leaking. We didn't understand about mold at the time, and so we didn't think anything of it. But I started to develop pretty severe insomnia at the time. And at the same time, because of all the symptoms that I was having, in part, we changed our diet to a whole foods plant-based diet. We started incorporating lifestyle changes like walking and waking up at the same time, going to bed at the same time, and nothing seemed to help. It just was pretty severe.
And then after that time, we had moved into the RV we had. It's a motorhome, and it had a leaky roof. The seams that ran down it failed and leaked, and kind of unbeknownst to us, and probably contributed to the mold problem. And I think at this point you kind of started developing anxiety from that, not really knowing.
Yeah, so I had never had anxiety before. I didn't even really know what it was, but I found out that what it was, and so yeah, I had developing worse anxiety as time went on too. So we bought our own home. We bought a fixer-upper. The fixer-upper wasn't real bad. It was just needing some updating. So we thought, we didn't think that it had mold. We never smelled anything or smelled anything. We didn't notice anything. My symptoms continued still, and I started developing some new ones.
And so this house, again, just kind of unbeknownst to us and our, just I think like most people having a general knowledge of molds, we didn't understand, the repercussions of it. So this particular house You know, it had a rotted a floor from the previous owners. The toilet had overflowed, and so that floor was moldy and rotten. I had to replace that. Had a leaking pipe under the sink that had to be fixed. It also had a whole house swamp cooler with ducting that, if you're not familiar with the swamp cooler, the unit outside has pads that get wet, and then it draws air across those pads and blows cool air into the house. Well, it's cool, damp, moist air, you know, in the middle of summer. So that's, you know, basically pushing wet air into your home and further creating mold problems.
Yeah, so my Pat started developing rashes that were unexplained. We didn't know where they were coming from. They would just kind of come and go. We thought it was, we attributed it to stress. And also our daughter developed gastritis. And usually you don't have gastritis when you're only 15 years old. And she also had pretty severe food intolerances, and she also had anxiety and depression. My symptoms started a lot more severely with food intolerances. I had ear ringing and excess earwax, especially in this one ear. I had SIBO symptoms. Also I had UTI symptoms, but when I would go to the doctor, I didn't have an infection. And just continuing GI issues. I even had eye problems, and at one point I was tested positive for a brain tumor in the meninges. I started detoxing because I was fearful for my health at this point and fearful for my family's health. I didn't connect mold at all with it. I didn't really know anything about mold. And so I was looking at things like our carpet. I was looking at the smart meter that was outside of our house. And so I didn't even really suspect mold. So yeah, that's pretty much about that, right?
Yeah,
and
I will say the unexplained rashes I had, I think like 3 bouts of kind of all over body rashes that I haven't had since living in that house. So that's interesting.
We sold that house and we bought another RV. And this time it was a newer RV. We didn't think anything about mold. And but I started getting even sicker. So I continued with the lifestyle. I was eating a whole foods plant-based diet that was a lot stricter than what I had even done before. I had done a lot of detoxing and juice fasting and eating raw foods. I even juice fasted for 60 days, and it helped while I was doing it. But since I was still living in the situation, all the symptoms would come back. So when we lived in the RV, which we're back in again, I decided to go to the doctor. And she had tested me, that she thought that I had SIBO, but she also thought that I might have been exposed to mold. So she told me to do this simple eye test that's online called the VCS test. And I failed the test. And so she had me do a myco urine test, and I tested positive for that. After that, we went ahead and tested the RV, and Pat can tell you about that.
Yeah, so at this point, were kind of awakening to the mold and the symptoms, especially that Jana was having. And we did what's called an ERMI test, ERMI, which is a wipe or a kind of a swab sample test. You do in various places, and then you send that into the laboratory, and then they send you back a report of that, showing the various mold levels that you have from the areas that you've swiped, like Stachybotrys mold and the bad ones. And our results came back pretty elevated, and which was surprising because you couldn't smell mold in here. We didn't see it. I had no noticeable leaks, and so that was, I guess I personally was really in disbelief. I didn't believe we had a mold problem. So as of recently, I've opened the back corners of this RV because we found some soft spots in the paneling, and sure enough, both corners, just the insulation and the wood paneling was very moldy. And as soon as I opened up, you could just really smell it. And we've begun remediating those areas with a product called Easy Decon. As far as we know, is from a remediation standpoint, that's the best stuff you can buy. Was developed for the military use, and so that's kind of where we're at this point.
After we found out that we had mold in the RV, we rented a house that we didn't think that had mold in it. Again, we never noticed any smell or saw anything or felt anything. But after the first rain, it leaked in quite a few places. And I continued to get sicker. And I found out about Dr. St. Rose. I contacted him. I went to Mesa for a month doing detox treatments, and I felt so much better. But I didn't realize that even going back into mold for a short time, you will get sick again. And it doesn't take very long for you to get sick. And so that's what I did. We came back to get our stuff to move out, and I re-exposed myself. I would highly recommend going and getting treatments for mold. It's the fastest way to get well, but just make sure that you are in a mold-free environment when you go back. Dana wanted us to tell people what mold has cost us. And I'll just say, for me as a woman, I feel like it costs your looks. I don't look the same. I have probably 40 pounds more. It's very hard on your finances. We've lost friends over it. Some of our family doesn't necessarily understand or believe. It's hard on our marriage. And really the biggest thing is we haven't found anywhere safe to live. There's only been a few places that we've been at that I didn't react to. I do detox techniques, and they do help, but really the core thing, the foundation has to be that you are not only detoxing by living a good lifestyle, by the right diet and lifestyle things, but also most importantly that you're out of mold. So yeah, that's my story. I just hope that it's a blessing and a help to somebody else that might have symptoms that they aren't getting better by changing their diet or by changing some lifestyle things. And that's what Mine was, I continued to get stricter on my diet, but I actually was getting sicker.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for listening, and like Gianna said, we hope this it can help somebody else by
Yeah.
hearing our story. So
Thank you.
thanks.
Okay, so you can see it's a very real thing, and it's a very difficult thing. So I want to turn the time over now to Dr. John St. Rose. He has a clinic in Mesa, Arizona, to which I have been. I was there almost 2 weeks in January for treatment for my Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and pretty sure we got that licked. So I'm going to stop my screen share, and Dr. St. Rose, if you need to share.
Slide presentation here. I'm going to skip a few things though. I just want to say before I start, I'd just like to thank Jenna and the ministry, Dana and Jenna, and the group for the ministry, especially all the good things that they're doing to help people be aware of not only mold, but everything else that's going on around in our bodies that are affecting our health, our mental capacity, and that is affecting our spiritual growth as well. So I'm grateful to be here today, and hopefully this presentation will be something of edifice to all of us today to help us understand the effect of mold and how it can affect our whole body, not just part of our body, our entire body. And we're going to see today. And I'm going to open up as well for some question and answers as well, if I don't cover everything. As you can see, that we'll be discussing today the hidden cause of common illnesses. The hidden cause of common illnesses. And guess what it is? It's mold. I'm not going to discuss much on the Bible aspect of it. I did cover some in Ellen White as well. I'm going to skip those because Dana did cover some of those as well. So I'm going to just skip those completely and go to the next phase, okay, for time's sake. Because I just wanted to just go over how old the exposure of mold has been, even down to the Bible days. I would say even back to Egypt. They have actually found in areas of the cave and in areas of the pyramids that they found tons of molds in those areas. So molds have been around for a very, very long time. The idea is most people don't understand the effect of what molds can do to the body. So I'd like to, let me see if I can get this out of the way here. Okay, let's see if I can get this out of my way. Okay, great. Okay, so the idea is understanding molds and mold spores and toxins. A lot of people always hear about mold and hear about all these factors about mold. Okay, what is it? Okay, I hear about toxins, mycotoxins. Well, what are those factors? So mold actually carry multiple types. There's fungi. You may have mildew. You may have yeast, candida. They're actually all the same family. You may have valley fever. These are all in the same family. They may be called by different names, but they're all types, okay, that may be affecting the area. And molds actually grow indoor or outdoors, basically. And they actually thrive in damp, warm area and humid environments, like in the East Coast and areas like that, areas where it's very humid. They like stuff like that. Common types of mold that you see a lot of is Cladosporium is one of the big ones, Penicillium, Alternaria is the one, and Aspergillus. Those are the big ones. Stachybotrys, which is black mold, is one of those that you will see sometime, but if it's there, it's one of the most deadly ones. Very, very bad. It causes a lot of factors. This is one of the ones we actually see that's linked to things like MS, multiple sclerosis, and things like that. And some cancers, a very, very bad boy. But it's one of those you don't want to be exposed to. Let me give you a little history of myself while I'm there. So I was exposed to Stachybotrys, which is black mold. Just to give a little history of myself. So when I was in medical school, my last year in medical school, I was probably one of the top students in, I would say, in the clinical aspect. Most of the professors would come to me, they would ask me questions and certain things, because I was pretty good with the clinical aspects when I was in the clinic. And all of a sudden, in my last year, one of my professors said to me, she said, "You're not performing well. You're not answering the questions well enough. You're not dealing with the patients well enough. I think I may have to put you to remediation." I said, "No, no, no, doc. Something is going on. I've been tired and drained. My brain fog. I can't remember anything. I just feel really bad, And I don't know what's causing this, but it's unusual. But doc, I've been in your class for about 5 semesters, as a student, and I've been pretty good. Now, all of a sudden, you're saying that I need remediation? I don't think so. I'm one of your best students, And she said, "Well, we don't know. You can't relate well. You can't remember the patient's name when you come to explain the situation about the patient's health. I don't know what's going on with you, I said, "Listen, doc, something is going on." And it so happened that I have one of those air purification systems. It's called an IQ Air. It's a very good. If you need to get an air purification system, you should get that one. It's called the IQ Air. It's a Swiss device. It's very nice. And I had it in my living room kitchen area, and it would run all the time. Now, one day we turned it off, and all of a sudden I smelled this smell that's coming from the kitchen area. And that's how good that system is. And I went under the sink, and lo and behold, when I look in the back of the sink, there was a drip there, but in the back section, the wall was wet completely. There was like black. And I touched it with my finger. Oh my goodness, the wall just fell in. It was that bad. It was mold galore. I didn't know what to do. I never dealt with mold before, but I went in there with my head peeping in through, pulling all those debris out. Oh my goodness, I got exposed so bad to that mold. Someone said at one point, I remember, if you have mold, spray Clorox. I said, okay, I got some Clorox and I sprayed it on there. And bear in mind, that's the worst thing you can do, to spray Clorox on live mold, because it actually expands it even more to actually spread. So I actually was causing more harm to myself, not even realize it. So I went back to school even worse than I was before. And my eyes was red, I was itching, my breathing was off. At that point, my wife was running through the field and she collapsed. My son was acting really weird. He had some attitude problems, anxiety problems. I had some anxiety problem myself because I couldn't deal with stuff well, people very well. And I was feeling horrible. My eyes were like bloodshot red. I came to class and the professor said, "You know what? You look very sick. You need to go home. You look very contagious." I said, "Doc, it's mold. I got mold contamination in my house. This is what's causing my problem." She said, "No, you need to go home." So I went to another professor and I told her, she said, "Yes, all the symptoms you're having is mold. We need to actually test you." And lo and behold, they sent me to a place, this is close by. They did what we call biophotonic therapy, which is UBI, take your blood out and they run it through. I'll talk about it a little later. And I felt better instantaneously with just one treatment. And then I did a lot of treatment. And we'll go over some of those later of what those treatments were. But I went through a lot of treatment to actually get over this. I was able to graduate actually, but my memory was still gone. I had about probably 85% of my memory probably was gone. I couldn't remember anything. But at the same time, with the treatments, it took a while. It took probably I'll say about a month and a half of lots of treatment. And I was able to get a lot of my memory back in order to take the first exam, the last exam, I should say, for my boards. But this mold is something else. But when you look at mold, there's an aspect we need to look at is the spores. The spores are very dangerous. Why is the spore dangerous? Because you can't see them with the naked eye most of the time. So molds carry these spores on them, and these spores are tentacles, and what they can do, if you try to kill this mold, these spores can spread, and they can land on areas. And even though now you actually wipe the area out, it's not no mildew you can see anymore, it's not moist anymore. These molds can grow on dry area. They can actually survive on dry indoor, outdoor area. And when the right climate is there, or I would say the surface moisture is there, they grow. These molds can grow and they can get, have you ever wondered, all of a sudden you have something that happened in your house, all of a sudden, you're like, where did this mold come from? There was no mold in my house before. Well, these spores can linger in areas for a long time. There's a special light that you can use and you can check your house and you can see that they have mold that you'll never know was there, that is actually lasting around. So these spores can be around for a while. But the problem is that when these spores actually cause the molds to grow, these spores are present, as you can see here. The mycotoxins actually is the problem as well. This is the one that gets you sick, makes you feel bad. Those are the symptoms that Jana was talking about that we will discuss in a few minutes. These are what it's called. It actually can actually get in the air and be released in the air. And you breathe these things in, and they can cause some problems. Okay, so these are some of the factors we want to discuss. So people like say, well, I don't think mold is a problem. Well, you heard from Jana. She said it costs her a lot of money to treat this mold symptoms. Yes, illness caused by mold, indoor mold, is about $3.7 billion. Now that's not chump change here. That's a lot of money. So the cost of dealing with mold is quite expensive. I can tell you that for myself. Just dealing with the school equipments and dealing with some of the doctors I knew, it still cost me over $4,000 out of my pocket with equipment that I already had at the school and with doctors that I knew already that was treating me for low cost. So you can see it costs a lot of money to treat mold. Okay, so what percentage of people are affected by mold? Let's say, so approximately 6 to 10% of the general population and 15 to 50% of persons who are genetically prone. And we're gonna go over this genetically in a minute. Prone to develop allergies, atopic individuals, we call those, such as asthma, different things like that, allergic mold. So that's according to the National Academy of Sciences. And this is just a myriad. It can be even higher than that. But let's go on. So what percentage of homes in the US have mold? So it said about 70% of homes contain mold. That's a lot. That's more than 50%, 70%. And about 28% of the people have mold allergies, that they're shown it. None of that they're actually known, they're actually having these allergies. And additional 18% of school buildings contain mold and 26% of hospitals. And I think that is being higher now because those are the ones that they have not checked, probably all of them. But I think that percentage is even higher. So mold data here. So according to the Occupational Safety and the Health Association, OSHA, which is one of the big governing area, they estimate that over a quarter of the United States buildings are water damaged. Imagine that, a quarter of the United States buildings have water damage or have had water damage. That's a lot. So no wonder Jana and Dana have been saying they're going from place to place and they find that they're having mold. No wonder, it's because so many places have been exposed to water damage and to mold, and we don't even realize it. I remember one time I went to a person's, I had a patient. I said, do you know if there's any exposure of water damage in that house that you have had before? Well, yes, I think was in the basement. And this individual was a friend of mine, and there was a patient. And I said, did you see anything in your basement? They said, no. I said, well, you gotta remember with mold, you don't always see it, even though it's breeding behind the walls and other places. But the thing about it is sometimes you can have damage and it can be in there for a period of time and cause problems. So a lot of the time, even with kids, let's check this out. Children data on mold. 1 in every 10 children dies each year due to respiratory illness caused by mold and air. I've seen it. I've seen a lot of kids come in and a lot of doctors have seen kids, and these kids have issues with respiratory problems and they will never link it to molds. They think it's bacteria issues. They think it's allergies, all these other factors. And they're actually saying, oh, it's just, don't worry about it, it's all in the head. They never check mold because they don't think that mold is an issue. And it is. Some of these kids actually develop asthma and they die of asthma, and it was probably mold related. So yes, mold can be a factor. It's a definite factor in our United States, and especially in the East Coast, where you see a lot of humidity and around areas where there's a lot of a body of water. Like in the Virgin Islands, for sure, we are surrounded by water. There's a lot of humidity over there. I remember when I was there, I was living down there for about a year and a half with my dad. I went to help my dad. And that's before I came to the United States for medical school. And my dad had some remodeling done with his house, so he couldn't do so many different things. So he couldn't fix his roof at the time. And I remember my son, Trey, who's at 12 now, actually 13 now, but at the time he was about almost making 2 years old. In my closet, all of the clothes in there was like loaded with mold. He would run through the clothes, and he came up with a severe fever that sent him into a seizure. And my wife was home and she didn't know what to do. So she sent him to the hospital because I was not home. And they couldn't figure how to treat the fever. The fever was so high, they tried everything, they couldn't bring it down. So I told my wife, she called me at the clinic in the Virgin Islands. We had a little clinic down there. I said, bring him over to me. So she brought him over to me at the to the clinic. And the first thing I did with him, I gave him a colonic to bring the fever down. I gave him a colonic because guess what? A lot of those molds, they breed in the colon. They breed in the colon, and a lot of those toxins they actually release in there and they multiply. So what I did, I gave him an enema. As soon as he began to release all these toxins, he jumped off and said, I want to go home, I'm hungry. Immediately like that. That's how quick these toxins, when they're released from your body feels better that fast. But the most common ones you actually see, I don't think my son had any of the black mold, but things like aspergillus, penicillium, cladosporium, those are the main ones that you see. And those are the ones that actually spread the fastest. So you will see those common ones, and they cause a lot of problems. So how long does mold grow after damage? So it's recommended basically after water damage, or if you had some water damage, you want to make sure that you get it dry quickly and treat it very quick within 24 hours. If you don't do that, what can happen? It can proliferate the growth factor of these molds. So you definitely want to make sure that you clean up that and dry it in as fast as possible. Okay, it's mold. If you let it linger around, it will grow. So when should a professional individual come and check if you have for mold remediation? Anytime a moldy area exceeds 9 square feet, that's pretty small, right? Anytime you exceed 9 square feet, you should actually get someone in to treat that. Now, bear in mind, if you have someone treat it, or if you are expert in treating it, or if someone comes in to treat it and they see mold, you should have them cut, let's say if in the sheetrock, they should cut at least 2 feet in, 24 inches in, if they're cutting that wall in, to actually make sure that they're treating the mold effectively. As Dana stated, in the Bible days, they would remove the stones that were affected and they would get rid of those stones. And then it would be 7 days and they will come back in. The prophet will come in and or the priest, I would say, will come in and check. And they would actually come in, and if there's growth, basically that house would be considered to be a dunghill. It would be destroyed. So the idea is mold is a very serious problem. And even in the Bible, they burn the house down sometimes. I'm telling you, this stuff is crazy. But what I didn't tell you, just recently, I was out of my house for about almost 10 weeks. We had stocky bog tree again in my home. Oh my goodness. It affected my little one, who was about 4 months at the time. Actually, no, he was about 3 months at the time going into it. And he got pretty sick to a point, respiratory problems. We had to get out of that house immediately. And we began to treat him, and he's better now by God's grace. Praise God, he's better. And it did affect my son as well. He was having some issues as well. And I had some itching, some skin issues as well. And a little brain fog was coming up there. My wife also had issues as well with her breathing. some respiratory issues, and also some brain fog as well. So we were able to get out in time. So this is some factors that definitely. So what are some of the source of indoor molds? So some people may say, well, I don't think I have mold in my house. So how do you know? Well, your air conditioning system is one of the biggest factor. When I was in medical school as well, I realized earlier before I got into my house that I had gotten exposed to mold because in the apartment I lived in, there was a leak in the air conditioning system and I was getting sick all the time. And I didn't realize, I thought it was Legionnaires because of the air conditioning drip. But I found out later after I moved from my house and I told some of the professors that it may have been mold that was actually in the duct system in the apartment complex. So things like dehumidifiers also produce moistures as well. Well, humidifiers, I should say, also produce moistures as well. Vaporizers, attics as well in the basements area where there's moisture or there may be leak. Crawl spaces in the house. Bathroom tiles, sometimes they can have leaks in between the crevices of the tiles and molds can grow or mildew can grow in between those. Showers, damp closets, definitely is one of the biggest areas as my son in the islands. Things like potted plants, definitely, some people don't realize that. Certain plants with water that are actually held in the bottom of the plant. You shouldn't be overwatering your plant with water sitting in there like that. That can grow mold as well. Refrigerator lining, the gasket. We don't realize those gasket of the refrigerator, one of the highest for mold. Here's another area that we didn't talk about. In the washing machine, one of my professors, Dr. Crinian, says, if you're going to get a washing machine, you don't want to get one of those that actually, you want to get one of those that you can load from the top. He said, what happened is when you load from the side of those, they actually have, the gasket can build a lot of mold in there, just like the refrigerator. And it can be very toxic to individuals. So you want to be careful with those as well. You want to get one of those top loaders. It's a little better. I do have one in the clinic, but we try to clean it as much as possible. We try to spray it up in there to make sure that nothing build up in there. If you have one, just do that. Just make sure it's cleaned well on a continual basis. Old beddings and pillows. Very important to change those regularly, as Dana was talking about Ellen White. She mentioned, and if you don't air your area very well and actually cause light to come in, ultraviolet lights actually definitely UVC actually kills those stuff pretty well. Sunlight is very, very good for mold and keeping it on the bay, and fresh air really do that as well. So damp areas and basement areas are very good places. Dishwasher machine areas as well. If it's not cleaned well, even though it produces heat, you gotta remember after the dishwasher machine cool down, it can, and if you don't use it for a period of time, that can grow mold as well. So you definitely want to look in those areas as well. So outdoor sources for mold, yes. Compost heaps. A lot of people don't realize that we want to actually get our compost. Compost should actually be a good distance from our house. Definitely a good distance, because as you're making those composts, definitely it can grow mold, but you want to make sure that the compost is not too close to the house, because these things can actually come into the house, especially aspergillus. They can get into the house. And hay cutting. I remember a story of a gentleman who actually went to visit his doctor, and he was so sick. He was actually dealing with wet hay, and that has been there for a period of time, and it wasn't actually dried well. And he was dealing with it, and he was so sick respiratory wise, and his doctor kind of did a good history in him, a functional doctor, did a good history, and found out that his exposure started when he started dealing with the hay. So definitely, if you have hay and you're dealing with it, make sure the hay is dried well before you deal with it. Harvesting, definitely harvesting fruits and vegetables, things like that. Rotten fruits, you want to make sure you don't put them into your batch, because these rotten fruits can actually cause mold. And damp garage, cottages, areas like that. Let me tell you something too. I forgot to say, when you go to a hotel, make sure you take an air purification with you, and make sure you go there early. You can bring a ozone machine, one of those ozone device, and you can get it online on Amazon, and make sure you purify that area good, the room good before you go in there. It's always good to get a hotel that does not have carpets. If you have no carpets in there, it's great. You don't want to have any carpets. Carpet is known to breed these spores as well. So these are some of those factors that you want to look into. I forgot to mention that in the indoor. Okay, let's go into the symptoms because Dana wanted me to go into those symptoms. So let's look at the symptoms here. Overlooked symptoms of mold exposure. So you can see the brain and dandruff, hair loss. I have a lot of patients that have hair loss and dandruff, and they don't realize that mold could be a factor with it. Memory loss, as we mentioned, brain fog, headaches, seizures, dizziness, vertigo. These are all factors that could be mold symptoms that we don't realize. As we can see, eye visual, which is the VCS test, as we mentioned, that's a good test for eye problems. Yeah, you can tell if there's problems there. Nosebleed. I've seen a lot of individuals I've tested and with mold, and they have nosebleed. My son, my youngest son, he had nosebleed. When with the second mold exposure we had just recently, my son was having a lot of nosebleeds, and that's how I knew he was affecting. The mold was affecting him, and with the nosebleed, with him came a lot of rash all over his body. He was itching galore, and I knew that the mold has gotten into his system and treated and have been a factor, because if you smell it, it's already in your bloodstream already, okay? If you can smell it, it's already in your bloodstream. That's the rule of thumb, all right? Then we look at skin. As we mentioned, skin rash and hives. We're gonna go over some of those symptoms in a minute. These are all there. So mold affect our whole body, the gastrointestinal tract, weight loss, weight gain. These are all can be factors of mold. So mold exposure symptoms. Let's go over a few of these quickly, and I can elaborate on some of them. Chronic inflammatory response syndrome. These are the factors that we consider is called CRS. Those are the main factors we call it with mold. It actually causes chronic inflammatory responses. It actually affects the tissues, the organ, every simple part of our body is affected by mold. That's why it's called a chronic inflammatory response. It actually can cause inflammatory factors in your joints, in your skin, all over. Then you have multiple chemical sensitivity. Most people that have mold, they can actually have sensitivity to perfume, to fumes, and all kinds of factors. And if you find individuals that are having these things, it won't be a bad idea to check for mold, to test for molds. And you have mast cells activation. Those are mast cells that actually cause allergen reactions. So these mast cells are stimulated in your system, IgE reactions. You can see histamines reaction. These are all due to mast cell activation in the immune response. Sleep disorders, a lot of people have that, even down to sleep apnea can be triggered by mold. People having problems, they can't sleep, they have restlessness, they have night sweats. These are all factors. Sometimes people may think they have things like menopause, they're having all those night sweats, and it could be just linked to just that, and this mold. Chronic fatigue syndrome, you feel so tired, you don't know, well, I had that chronic fatigue when I was in medical school. I just couldn't function, you want to go home from work, you don't want to do anything, you feel lazy, some chronic fatigue issues that you see there. You have adrenal fatigue factor, and then you have multiple food sensitivity, where you have allergies, so you eat something, later you feel tired and drained. And that's when you can check to see if you have a leaky gut issue, because most of the time, mold can cause leaky gut as well. Itchy skin, as I mentioned, on hives, you see that a lot. My son had that, itching a lot, scratching a lot, itching, all in the neck area. I had that as well. And these are all due to mold, can be due to mold as well. Psoriasis, autoimmune issues as well. It's all to be due to mold. Muscle weakness, seen it a lot. You do see that muscle weakness, as I said, things like MS, ALS, these are all can be linked, especially Stachybotrys, black mold, can definitely be linked to those as well. Anxiety. Now, anxiety, people don't realize, I've had patients with anxiety issues that comes in, and they say, well, I have no problem. I have no problem with anxiety problem, but I have anxiety, I don't understand. I don't have anything that's bothering me. I don't have any stressors or anything like that. I don't have any issues that I can think of, but I have anxiety. Mold can cause it. If you have someone or if you have anxiety problem and you can't pinpoint what's causing it, it's good, or depression or attention deficit disorder. It's good to check because sometimes a leaky gut can cause these things. You have a dysbiosis in the gut that can cause that. So the idea is it's good to check if you see these things. Restless leg syndrome. At nighttime, you have those legs. It can also be linked to that as well. Hearing loss. Oh yeah, definitely. Hearing loss, Meniere's disease, all those factors, air pain, cloggage in the air ducts, all of those factors, I've had those too. All of those factors can be linked to that. I've had patients, I had a patient recently came in and I had to treat her and she had air pain. She had blockage in her air. I couldn't even do the hyperbaric on her. And we had to drain her out and do some treatment. And she's better now. In a few days, we were able to treat it and she was better. But yes, air issues can be there. Vertigo, dizziness. These are all factors that can affect your neurological, because you see mold and those mycotoxins can affect the neurological disorder. They're mycotoxins that are there. So yes, dizziness and all those factors, they can cause brain damage. They can cause brain cancers. They can cause a lot of different cancers as well. So things like loose stool or constipation, things like SIBO, they might say they have SIBO, but it's actually more could be due to mold. It may not be a bacterial overgrowth, it could be mold overgrowth, which can also cause a bacterial overgrowth as well. So there are a lot of factors there involved that people don't realize that can be going on. And a lot of the time when people have SIBO, a lot of the time they may have a yeast overgrowth as well, a dysbiosis there. So it's good to look at those factors as well. Asthma, fibromyalgia, we went over that, is a factor that you can see with mold as well, because I've had patients with fibromyalgia and they said they've done all these tests, they've done all these things, except a mold test, and they haven't seen these things. So definitely these are factors that can be there. As I mentioned, cancer, systemic fungal issues that you will see as well. Things like a yeast infection as well can be a factor as well, that you see it literally on the tongue. You may see thrush on the tongue. You may have a chronic urinary yeast infection. You may see that in some female. That's all fungal related as well. Headaches, migraines can be linked as well. Low libido, let me go over that for a minute. And period issues, and especially going into menopause. These are factors that I've seen with guys who come in and they say, oh, I have a low libido, I don't know what's causing it. And you test their high mold content, mycotoxins content in the system. I have ladies that have irregular periods all the time, and they're not sure what's causing. They're feeling tired, and they're having the pulse is racing, and they're thinking that they're having menopause issue, but it's actually pseudo-menopause. And even into menopause, you can have these factors as well. So it's good to check in these factors to make sure if you've seen these things and your doctor can't pinpoint what's causing it. These can be factors. Ovarian cysts, ovarian syndrome, polyovarian cyst syndrome. Yeah, those can be factors as well, because it can actually affect your sugar level and different things like that as well. Chronic sinusitis and stuff like that, rhinosinusitis. These are all factors that can, because yeast can actually breed up in the sinuses. I've seen it before. I've treated it doing ozone testing, and I've seen those stuff come out, and people feel so much better with that. As we discussed, the low libido, difficult with the periods and stuff like that, sensitive to fragrance. These are all factors that are there. Okay, here's the rule of thumb I mentioned before, all right, for mold exposure. Remember, if you smell it, it's already in your bloodstream, okay? So if you smell mold, you smell this musty factor when you go into a building, guess what? It's already in your bloodstream already, because mold, when it goes into your blood, it goes to your nasal, it goes to your olfactory, it goes through your whole system, and it gets into your bloodstream. And once it gets to your bloodstream, guess what? You can't get it out unless you treat it. But we're going to go into that. Okay, listen to this. This is pretty interesting. So this is the question most people ask me. So why do some people become more ill than others with mold? Okay, here's the reason why. So with mold exposure, water damage building, some people are more better able to deal with the mold toxin than others. So the body flags the mold as an unfriendly antigen. Here's the word here, antigen, and creates an antibodies to rid the body of the subsequent exposure. So here's what happened. So however, about 25% of the population has a HLA DR gene, which is a form of lymphocytic form of an allergen that the body's produce. So what that is, that HLA actually is a genetic marker that actually allows your body to detect proteins that is not of the body, okay? And with this, a lot of people are genetically susceptible to mold because of that particular gene factor that they don't have. So these people have those foreign substances like antigens coming to the system, and the defense are ineffective in clearing out the mold. So they are more susceptible to the illness in fighting mold. So it may be a good idea to check to see if you have that genetic factor involved with mold. So that's why some people can go into a house and they can have problems, and some other person can go in and they're like, oh my goodness, I feel so bad. Because the susceptibility is the HLA factor based on the protein antigen factor that's there. Okay, so there you go, bullseye. So mold elimination, there you go. So the best way to eliminate mold is to first identify the potential problem area with mold. Definitely. If you want to check like damp basements, dry rot, things like that, high humidity area, house plants, unventilated rooms, different things like that. You want to check the garden area. You want to check your dehumidification systems to make sure that your exhaust fans are clean and they're not have all that stuff in there. You want to check the cement. You want to check the grouts in your floor. You want to check all these areas. You want to remove carpets. If you have old carpets in your house, you want to remove all these things and just put towels. You don't want to have carpets in your house, okay? That is a no-no. It's a bad environmental builder for mold and other pathogens as well, okay? And you want to make sure your house is well ventilated. And you want to bring in a professional that knows what they're doing to test the air quality as well, all right? And to check your walls and everything else in your house. Okay, how can you know if mold is affecting you internally? All right, there are a few tests that can be done that you can use to check. You can have microtoxin profile test. That's a urine test. You can have organic acid test. It can show some factors as well. That's a urine. You can have a super mold sensitivity test. And that one is done with serum. Someone can draw your blood and they can test for that. You can have stuff like a stool analysis test, like a GMAP test or a GI effect stool test, profile test. These are some tests that can be done. Or you can have, you can use a finger stick test, which actually can be tested by serum as well. Or you can have a visual contrast sensitivity test, as they talked about earlier. Those can actually look for can check like for neurotoxins that can be damaging the neurons in your eyes and things like that, affecting your visual acuity and things like that. Saliva test as well. That could be a lot of factors that can test. Actually, somebody asked me, yes, you know what? Someone asked me at one time, can saliva tests be used to test for like candida test? It's an old test we used back in the days. I think it's effective, to be honest with you. When you spit in a glass of water, a clear glass of water, and it begins to separate and stringy segment, that actually can tell if you have some form of a candida yeast. I've done it before. I think it actually is it's a good test to me. It won't be my final test, but I think it's a good test to actually test and to see if there's actually candida or yeast in your system. But a good test as well is looking to see if you have thrush, if you have those white factors in your tongue, if you're having a lot of discharge, white discharge, that can be a factor to tell yes that there's candida or yeast, and there could be other mold factor that may be there as well. Okay, So tools for treating mold exposure. These are just some of the factors. I'm not going to give all of them, but colonics is one of the biggest one. I think it's one of the biggest one, actually. Dr. Crinian was about a doctor of environmental and naturopathic medicine. He told me, if you're going to treat any mold or yeast or candida issue, if colonics or animals is not in the party, it's not going to be effective. He said because most of the yeast is bred in the colon, and most of the damage is done in the colon and it's spread throughout the system as well, systemically. So you need to have colonics involved. Saunas are very important because you need to sweat these mycotoxins out of your system. And it's very important, a good sauna, actually I would say if you have ozone, you can combine to it. If you have someone that actually is a doctor that actually has a good system, or you can go to them, a good practitioner. Iron cleanse is pretty good as well. Those foot baths, actually, it can actually help eliminate some of those mycotoxins as well. Nebulization can work well if you have a doctor that actually can work well with things like hydrogen peroxide, things like that, that can work well, or things like we call amazing O2. You can inhalate those. If you're not a doctor that can do those, you can do those under a doctor's care. And hyperbaric chambers seems to work very well. High oxygen content seems to be hard on mold. So that's a good aspect as well in doing that. You can talk to a practitioner that has a hyperbaric chamber, and they can actually show you how to have series of that, and that can help as well. Certain IVs with a licensed clinic, I said a licensed clinic or facility. It doesn't have to be a license, but a licensed facility. Things like hydrogen peroxide IV, things like vitamin C IVs, things like UBI. And UBI is like a biophotonic treatment using ultraviolet light. And the best one for I would say for mold, UVC seems to work very good on mold toxicity. And in UBI, you have UVC, UVA, UVB. They have all three in there as well. Glutathione IV seems to work well. PC, which is actually phosphatidylcholine IVs, etc., etc. There's other ones as well. I'm not going to mention all of them, but these are some that can be utilized. Binders seem to work well when you're treating mold. It's always good to use binders to actually bind those mycotoxins and spores in the gut, like charcoal, zeolites, like sodium bentonides, clay, alpopectin, silica, something like humic powder. All those are good. There are a lot more, but these are some good ones that can be used. Some certain botanicals like bilberry, things like black walnut. Actually, coconut extract actually works very well on them. That works very, very well. If you get like MCT oil, actually have all of those factors in there that actually helps to actually destroy mold as well, and candida as well. Golden seal, noni fruit extracts, garlic seem to be very good. Milk thistle seed seem to work good on the liver, removing toxins there. Echinacea seem to work well. Black walnut hull, not only parasitic, but it also work well on fungals. Lavender oil, oregano oil, galbanum oil seem to work well. Tea tree oil, all those are good ones. Ginseng, which is a bitter herb, seem to work well. Berberine, there are a lot more. I'm not going to mention all of them, but these are some of the factors that can be utilized that seems to work well. I do use a lot more of that stuff in my clinic. Other things I use, but this is just to whet your appetite a little, some things that we utilize. So this is the end of my presentation here. I'm going to open up for some questions and answer at this moment, if we have any.
Awesome. Yes, we do have questions. So we're ready. I can get started with, I'll start from the top. There was a question: many times a workplace does not like to admit mold pollution and its effects on workers' health. How can one go about bringing awareness and responsibility to this entity when you get deadly sick?
Okay,
it's not a medical question, but it's about how to deal with the workplace and convincing them that they're sick from.
Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a good question. If you saw I mentioned in there OSHA. OSHA is a good company. Now, first of all, you need to go to the chain of commands. you go to your supervisor first and tell them, listen here, I think there's some mold exposure there. I think I've been sick. A lot of people have been going home sick. And if nothing is done about it, you go to the next chain of command. You go into HR and explain to them and say, listen here, we're having some whole issues. Can you bring a medical person in to examine the area pretty well? And then if that's not being resolved, guess what? You can be a whistleblower. You can be a whistleblower and actually bring in OSHA or bring in the health department, and they can deal with it. They can test, or you can let the department know, listen, can we bring someone in to test the environment and see if mold toxins is high in the environment, and they can check for that as well. Okay.
How can cleaners, if like there's cleaners going into different homes to clean, what can be done to protect themselves during those 3 hours that they're cleaning? It seems like that's the question.
Okay, great. So there is those HEPA filter masks and stuff you can use. I think it's called the HEPA PPO, I think they're called, with the sides mask. Those, I think it's called the HEPA PPO. Those can be utilized when you're cleaning homes. They actually can block a lot of the mold from getting into your system, into your nasal passageways. So that's a good one to actually prevent it from getting to the rest of it. Now, if you have, you can get what we call a I think it's called a steri suit. You can get them at Home Depot, a steri suit. You can put those on so it doesn't get in your skin, and you can put those HEPA masks on, and that helps you protect you while you're cleaning in homes. Now, if there's a home that's actually that you know it looks clean and everything else, you probably may not need a steri suit. But if there's a home that seems to be molded, I would probably get one of those from Home Depot. And you probably may look like one of those astronaut going into the home, but
Right, like a hazmat suit.
yeah.
All right, thank you so much for that answer. Next question is, what about green on the vinyl siding of a mobile home and on sidewalks? Is that something that we need to be cautious of?
Okay, so I didn't hear the first part of that question.
Yeah, it's the green stuff on the vinyl siding of a mobile home.
Oh, okay. So the greens, those greens build up on the side of a mobile home.
Right.
So those could be they're probably in the same family, probably like mildews and things like that. Those are probably in the same family. I'm not too much familiar with those, to be honest with you. But mold, there's like over 900 different kinds of fungal and mold out there. We only know about 80% of about 80 of them probably we know. And so it definitely could be part of the mold family or the mildew family, we call those. So I would say definitely I would be suspicious of those and get it tested or get it cleaned up by someone professional. Do it yourself professionally with at least the proper hazmat procedure.
Thank you so much. This is a question that I didn't post, but then I have a question. It's what is that light? Can we post on the chat like a link to where we can purchase a light that we can use to, test if there's any mold in our homes?
Yes, I think you can get those. I think you can get those on probably Amazon. I think Amazon or eBay probably you can get them. Those lights. I forget what the lights is called, but there's a lot of the testers that actually goes into homes. They actually use those lights, and it can show. I probably can find the name for it. I probably can give it to Dana, and she probably can let you guys know. But it's a very small light, like a small flashlight light, and you can flash it in areas where you think there's no mold, and it will show the spots that are there, basically, and you can see those. Yeah.
My next question was again about a machine, but I knew some people in the past who used ozone machines to get rid of molds in their rental property and things like that. Yeah. So is the ozone machine also something that's easily purchasable on something like Amazon?
Yes, there's one that I use. It's called, what is it called? The 3000. It's called. There's a 1500. There's a 3000. There's a 6000 device. I think it's called Ozone 3000. That's the one I have, but it's Ozone 1500. You can get it on Amazon. And that's the one I use here at the clinic. And it actually works tremendously well, but you cannot be in the house while it's running. You have to give yourself 2 hours before you can come back in after it's turned off, okay? So you can time it. You can time it for all, like for example, I'm leaving to go out of town for a couple of days. So I'm gonna have mine on 24 hours a day. It's gonna be running on all together. I'm gonna run my whole house through. And then when I come back, I'm gonna turn it off. But I have to have my mask for sure. Go in there and turn it off. And then have my family drive around for at least 2 hours with me. And then they can go into the house. So
Got
you can
it.
get one of those devices, but it's very, very good. It can cover about 3,000 to 6,000 square foot, I think, or less. Yeah.
Wow. So, what do you do to protect yourself when you are the first one to go in to turn off the machine?
Oh, here's what I do. Don't laugh now, all right? I hold my breath and I run in and run back out.
Got it. So that's good to know. And I'm sure there's more information we can search on how to
Well,
deal with that.
yeah, well, if you wear a HEPA mask, one of those HEPA masks, it should help as
Mhm.
well. It should prevent you from getting pretty sick. So just have one of those
Awesome.
HEPA masks. You can get those HEPA PPO masks. You can get
Mhm.
those at Home Depot. Just get one of
Mhm.
those, and it can actually prevent you from getting pretty sick.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you for that response. Is lupus related to mold?
Yes, actually, a lot of autoimmune diseases
Mhm.
are probably connected with mold. I would say almost all autoimmune have some form of a mycotoxic connection. Yes, I
Got it.
wouldn't put it by it. Yes.
So another question is, how far can you go with mold toxicity to be treated? I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I guess
Yes.
when
I think
do
I
you need to
understand.
get treated?
Yes. So the idea is with mold. Now, not everybody. Let me give an example. I had mold a couple of times, mold toxicity a couple of times,
Mhm.
and I would say, let me give you my testimony on that, how I treat myself, right? I had about probably 13 IVs, about probably 10 colonics, about probably 10 saunas or more. I had a lot of microbials I did. I was able to treat myself successfully, I would say successfully about 85% of the success rate within 2 months. Yeah. So, but guess what? Doesn't mean it's treated all the way. It can come to a year. Some people over years. It depends on their exposure and how systemic it is in their system. So the idea is based on the treatment you're getting. If the person is just doing oral treatments and basic treatments, it can take a year or so to get treated. But if you're doing everything, I mean, open up all the channels, open up the skin, open up the bowels, open up the kidneys, open up the lungs, you're treating all those areas at one time, you can treat this thing in a short period of time and feel a lot better in a short period of time. I've seen it.
So the more
I'd like to mention
comprehensive
something
the
too.
treatment, the better.
The more comprehensive the treatment is better. And that's in any detoxification protocol.
Right.
The more
Dana,
channels you open, the better it is.
Dana,
I'd
go
like to
ahead.
mention something. Yeah, there's also a very strong connection between mold toxicity and tick-borne diseases.
Yes.
I had Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and I know a lot of people that are struggling with Lyme and mold toxicity. And another thing that I think is important to remember with mycotoxins is it's not just inhalation. You can absorb these things through your skin. So
Yes.
even having your skin exposed to it is going to affect you.
Exactly. That's why I was mentioning about the steri suit that you can wear when you go into the homes. Definitely. You want to be very careful with that. Yeah.
Once your skin gets exposed, just wash your hands.
Well, the thing about it is, washing your hands really doesn't really kill the mold per se. There are different things you can do. Definitely, I would have soaps like with things like oregano or things like tea tree soaps. All of those are good soaps that can actually help to wash it off. A good soap that can wash out most of the mycotoxins is fine. Yeah, most of the soap, Castile soap seems to be good as well.
Castile.
Washing those off, yeah.
Amazing. Yes, oregano, very powerful. Did you have to burn the clothing and the items that were contaminated?
No, you don't have to. There are a lot of places right now, dry clean places that can treat your clothing. Yes. Yeah, you have to find out the one.
Got
You
it.
have to let them
There is
know.
a product now called Easy Decon. I think IntelliGuard is the company, and they have shown great success in cleaning. You can actually put it in your washing machine
Right.
and it will kill the mold.
Right. Also, that's true. Also, boric acid as well. If you add boric to your wash, that can help as well too. Mhm.
Dana, would you drop some oregano oil into your laundry?
Oh,
Or
I have
Dr.
done
Rose?
that. What I did when I was trying to save our clothes because we had already
Mhm.
lost all of our furniture, and I thought,
Mm.
what are we going to do? You know, I mean, we don't have any furniture now. We need at least clothing. And so what I did some research and found that if you wash your clothing in ammonia and clove essential oil,
Yes.
it was effective. And I was able to save almost all of our clothing. I
Yes.
did
Thank the
one
Lord.
day when we were getting ready to move from where, we were contaminated. I got a whole bunch of totes from Walmart and I put them outside and they never came inside the house. I did like 35 loads of laundry one day, just kept the washing machine going. And as soon as I pulled them out of the dryer, I went straight out the back door and hung it out to dry outside. And then I folded it up and put it in the totes and packed it. So it never came back inside that house again.
Right. Right.
So, and that's what I did. I used the ammonia and the clove essential oil. I went through a lot of clove essential oil.
Right. That's
Wonderful.
good. Yeah, that's good. Definitely. I like that. Yeah. What I meant to say was borax, not boric acid, borax. So
Borax.
you can get the borax from any of the stores. I don't know if you remember when I mentioned about Clorox, when I was sprayed it under the sink. They told me not to do that because it can spread. The chlorides can kill mold, but the thing about it, it spreads it as well. So the idea is what they told me to do. If you see mold, to use the borax and you spray it on there. Yeah, I think boric acid can probably help it too, but borax is the one you want. You can get it at any of the stores. I think you can get it at even at Walmart may carry a borax. I think you can get it at
Yeah, 20 multene borax.
Hmm?
Right.
They carry 20 multene borax at
Okay,
Walmart.
great, definitely. I know Susie, my wife, use it a lot in our laundry here, in our laundry room,
Right.
wash for clothes and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, Sister Davina mentioned borax. She gets it from Walmart.
Walmart. Okay, great.
Okay. So next question is, does black mold exposure damage the thyroid gland? There was some severe memory loss and TSH 20 in this individual's mother.
Mhm. Yeah, so mycotoxins affect every part of the body. Every gland is affected by mycotoxins in the higher level. So I would say yes, it can happen. It can damage a gland in the body. Yes, including the thyroid.
I can address that too, Dr. St. Rose. When I was in the thick of my mold toxicity at my worst, there was not an organ in my body that wasn't dysregulated. I mean, my brain, my heart, my lungs, everything hurt. I could tell that everything was haywire.
Yes.
And it was beginning to show up on my lab work. Now, I didn't have the specific lab works that I needed until later, but it was beginning to show up in my liver enzymes. It was beginning to, I had some testing done, some scans done on my kidneys, and it showed that there was damage to my kidneys. I was diagnosed with COPD.
Yes.
Just all these things, everything was dysregulated. Now, how much of this was mold and how much of it was my Rocky Mountain spotted fever, I'm not sure. But I know that at one point I even had acute hepatitis to the point that my liver swelled out from under my rib cage, and I had terrible nausea. All I could do was throw up.
Yes.
So it's a bad road to walk.
Yeah, and that's correct. A lot of the symptoms you find, definitely your liver enzymes. The liver is one of the main organs that actually suffers a lot from mycotoxins. It filters those mycotoxins through it as well. So you would see some elevated liver enzyme itching. All those are due to liver effects that's going on in the system that the skin is trying to get those stuff out of the system. So the liver definitely is a big organ that actually deals with it. And the liver deals with every organ in the system as well. So yeah, I agree with Jana, and Dana and Jana as well, about all of the symptoms they were having as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question is, let me just let somebody in really quick. Okay. What is the reason that many new structures domestic homes such as apartments, townhomes, rentals. What is the reason that many new structures are affected? Is it the ducting system?
Yes, well, the duct, yeah, can be a big factor. You have to look at the ducting effect. So for example, if you have a house that has a central system, or a apartment has a central system that's connected, if there's a basement and there's a leak in the basement, that leak can cause mold exposure in the basement. And if the basement is connected to that system of ventilation, it definitely can spread throughout the whole building. So yes, even though the building is brand new building and the rooms look brand new, yes, that can happen. Definitely can happen. It can cause sickness. So the best thing to do if you're going to move into some place and you're not sure of the building, if the landlord says, oh, this is a brand new room and it looks good, it's fine, there's no mold in here, get an environmentalist to come in. You can get them online, just go online, find an environmentalist that deals with mold, and they can come in and test the air quality. And you can know if that place is infected with mold.
Got it. Thank you so much. We may have covered this, but what do you do if you discover mold in the house? Move out, ozone machine, what would you recommend?
It depends on when you mean exposure of mold. Well, we have mold people may have mold in the shower, little mold, maybe mildew. Now, it depends on what you mean mold. How big is the exposure? As I said, a nice square foot of mold, you may need to call somebody in, as we mentioned earlier, and take a look at that, you know? And if they come in and they tested it, they said, this is actually throughout your whole house, you might need to move out of your house immediately. But I wouldn't just move out as yet. I would get someone to come in and test the air quality first. If it's in your bedroom, I would not sleep in that bedroom until I get it tested. I would get some things done and some tests done first. And if it's pretty bad, but if you're already having symptoms already, I would definitely move out of there immediately. If you're having like some of those symptoms we mentioned earlier, definitely get out of the house and have someone test it.
Well, what if the circumstances are that these individuals cannot financially, there's just no way to, go to a different place? What can lessen the issue at the least?
Well, I would get a tent and sleep outside, what I did.
It's exactly what I was going to say. That's what we did. We got a
Got it.
tent and stayed in the yard. All
what I
three
did.
of the panelists. Yeah, Jana's done it. Dr. St. Rose has done it, and I've done
Yes.
it. We've had to stay in a tent.
Oh yeah.
That's what it comes to. Yes.
Guess what? This is a medical missionary work, right? So you got to start learning to live in tents, right?
So I don't think we have any more questions. But are there any maybe parting words? Anything else you want our audience to take away before we finish up?
Somebody did ask a question here that I see. Did Dr. St. Rose have to burn his items or clothing in his house, or did he remediate or relocate?
Yes,
So
good question.
Mhm.
Yes, I did have remediation done. That's why I was out of my house for 10 weeks recently to have that done. And they actually cut the whole area out that was molded. They ozoned my whole place as well for that period of time. And they retested my house again. So everything was good to go before we came back in. They did my ducting system. They cleaned my whole, they did a detergent in my whole duct system. And I also did have what we call an ultraviolet light in my, it's called an air duster in my air conditioning system as well in there. So yes, so my house is good to go, definitely.
Awesome.
But I would say this.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna go to the next question, but you should finish.
Yeah, so I would say if you're going to move into a new house, don't buy a house before you have it mold tested. Okay, I know a lot of the time before you buy a house, your agent may have that done. It's part of the process, but I would definitely make sure that house is tested well, air quality, and not only if there's area that seems like they may have mold, you want to test the air quality and that area as well with a dry swab or something like that, or a Q-tip or something like that, and have it tested for sure. Yes.
Got it. And question about charcoal and onion for, detoxing.
Okay, yeah, good question. Now, cutting an onion can help withdrawing mycotoxins and other bacterial toxins in the air. And it can also kill them as well. So yeah, if you cut an onion and open it and keep it in there, it can do that. It's very good in helping clean the air as well. So garlic is definitely good. The fume of garlic seems to keep molds away as well too. So yes, definitely that can work tremendously.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So Dana, I think we're done with at least all the questions. So
Okay, very good. I really appreciate everyone who has come today. Dr. St. Rose, thank you for
Yes.
coming. I appreciate Jana pre-recording for us. And I hope sincerely that this has helped someone to see just how serious mold toxicity is. If you know anyone who has a mystery illness or a chronic disease they just can't get over, by all means, test for mold. Make sure that that is not a stone that you leave unturned.
Mhm.
So at any rate, Dr. St. Rose, would you have a quick closing prayer for us and then we'll end?
Yes. Father God, we want to thank you so much for this ministry that has opened up to help so many people understand, Lord, the effect of mold and how dangerous it can be on our health. Not only our health, Lord, but our spiritual life, because if our mental capacity is not there, how can we evangelize towards others? So we want to thank you for this opportunity to expose this mold incident that is affecting our homes and our lives. And we pray, Lord, by this information, that folks may be able to help themselves and help their family and friends to deal with this mold crisis and be able to get better and have abundant life. And we want to thank you as well for this ministry. We ask to continue to be with Dana and her husband and all the people that are connected to this ministry, that we continue to propagate this lifestyle and the gospel as well to a dying world out there. And we thank you for all this. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.